Now, there is some data out there, and there's all sorts of conflicting data out there, but one report I found from a CDC source was essentially that from 89 to 94, 96, the average caloric intake in the United States increased rather remarkably. There are other data that show smaller increases, but any data you see, you're going to find that. And in fact, when they released this information, Small America released this information through a publication called the Journal of Health Prevention, is it, or Promotion? Health Prevention, I thought it was. Okay, okay. And the cover note says that the CDC tells us that we could solve the obesity problem in this country by reducing caloric intake by 100 calories a day. Now that's approximately a 12-inch,
or by going to 70,000 per square mile.
We can do that. I mean, those are our two choices, and of course they found the other one better. But the point is, we all drank one Coke less a day. To oversimplify it, we would solve the problem theoretically.
Are those self-reported numbers? Do you know?
Yeah, you mean the
calorie consumption?
Oh yeah. Well, now it depends on the sort. No, there are all sorts of studies here, and I don't recall whether this particular study is self-reported.
I don't think they ever do studies where they ask people to report how many calories.
No,
they'll do studies where they ask people to report what they eat.
What they eat,
and they'll calculate the calories.
Yeah,
well,
but I mean,
you could take, for instance, the Consumer Expenditure Survey does a pretty good job on how much people spend on food by food category, and you could start doing the.
I think they even do diary studies sometimes where they'll give people a diary, have them fill out.
One of the things that's going to happen this year, what's the Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think, is coming out with the first time in a long time a new time use survey, which will really put a lot of the stuff in a more rational light.
Can I toss in a comment here,
Yeah.
Wendell? The other thing that's combined here is our population is aging some over the last 10 years. And as you age, the rate with your metabolism rate goes down, so you combine this with more intake of calories.
Well, and one of the things I ran into when I talked at the French University to some people, because they're very concerned about the subject there, and they said basically they're the problem. In Europe, the problem is more it's showing up in children more than adults because it's starting there. And they're saying the difference has to do, it does indeed have to do with physical exercise. It has to do with the fact that the kids are inside playing video games where they used to be out on the street. So there's no doubt that there's probably a physical exercise issue here, but it's not land use. It may have to do with some other things as well. And again, even Sprawl America would suggest, their data suggests it's not a big difference with respect to land use. Now, Professor Glaser, I think, was invited. I don't know if he's here at the conference, but he's done this piece of work where they went into great detail trying to get at the bottom of why it is we've got this obesity crisis, and generally they conclude that it has to do with diet. But here's the part I'll try to get at that the other two have not dealt with, and maybe this will be my contribution, and that is that what we've got here is spinning science or selling magazines, okay? In the journal article, in the Journal of Health Prevention, is that right, or Promotion? Prevention, okay. It is, one of the authors says, it is premature to imply, based upon this data, that sprawl causes obesity. Any number of other comments from the authors at various points to the effect that, to the extent that these amounts are small. That being the case, why did these guys trot up to Washington and do focus events for members of Congress on how we need to change the law to get at this problem of how land use is causing obesity? Why did this happen? Well, it has to do with selling things. The American Journal of Health Promotion sold its entire issue in September to Sprawl America and to Smart Growth America and to the Surface Transportation Policy Project. Now, everyone knows that I have plenty of differences with the Surface Transportation Policy Project, and that's fine. They're a transportation group, they have their views, I think they're wrong, but they're a legitimate group. They are not, however, a group that one would expect to go to for health information. I mean, and I wonder, Marlene, you live near Winston-Salem. I would urge you to contact R.J. Reynolds, because R.J. Reynolds may want to contact the American Journal of Health Prevention to see if they, promotion, excuse me, to see if they might like to sell an issue to R.J. Reynolds with respect to the health effects of smoking. I mean, one has to recognize here, we are dealing with selling an idea. And this is not the New England Journal of Medicine. I mean, the New England Journal of Medicine, or a legitimate, excuse me, not legitimate, that's not the word I mean to use, an appropriate, well, it is not appropriate. Yeah, I mean, the fact is, no respected, serious medical journal would even return a telephone call to somebody who suggests, we would like to take over your publication for a month, and that's what they did. I mean, this is just absolutely offensive as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, I don't hold very many strong views.
Wasn't it, when we were checking them out, didn't it suggest that this may have been published out of somebody's home?
Now, I don't know about that. I don't
It was a very low-key, it was odd sort of place that suggested it may not necessarily have been what we normally associate as a publishing entity.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this particular issue, there's a guy, some of you, if you're into the land use thing, many of you have probably seen, who?
David Goldman.
Oh, no, not David. No. This guy out of Canada, a former Californian who's taken Canadian citizenship, who you know by the name of Todd Littman. Todd I've debated. Todd's a well-meaning guy who I disagree with, but that's fine. He makes his points, I make my point. He's in there with an article. Now, Todd Littman knows, I would claim to know as much about medicine as Todd does, and I haven't had class 1 in it. I mean, the only reason I'm talking about it is I can understand numbers. I'm not creating new medical science here, just creating numbers. But and Joel and I argued about the terminology last night, and I decided to stay with it. But there's a very important issue here, because what's going on is these guys have gone and said, we've got statistically significant data. And I realize you're suggesting it may not be, but grant for the moment, it may be statistically significant. The way I say that, and Joel says I'm a little wrong in how I do it, but what that really says is this formula is fairly reliable for predicting results. It has nothing to do with how practically or mathematically significant it is. So what we get is I spread the data based upon counties with densities from 500 to 6,000 per square mile. Portland, or urban Portland's right in like 3,300, and LA's out at 7. Well, over that range, we have a reduction in weight predicted of 1%. I would suggest to you that that is mathematically insignificant. It is practically insignificant. Now let us think about traffic. Let us think about vehicle miles traveled per square mile based upon density. I would suggest that is mathematically significant. So right in the same field we see. And so the point is, it is not enough, and this is where the press really misses it, unfortunately, so often. It is not enough to simply parrot the line about it being statistically significant. Yes, it's statistically significant, I'll grant that, or at least for the sake of discussion. And it predicts something of no consequence whatsoever. So that we get what we get here, and I hope this is, yes, my favorite slide. I always like beating up on Neil Pierce. Last year I beat up on Neil Pierce for his having claimed that the Columbine massacre was the result of suburbanization. He denied that, but of course we got his column. Well, after this came out, he says, scientifically linking the U.S. pattern of highway-driven, sprawling, road-dependent development with the alarming epidemic of rising weight and obesity. Now, Neil, of course, as is so typically, made the most outrageous and irresponsible comment with respect to this publication. But the fact is, for Neil Pierce, there were hundreds, or well, maybe not hundreds, but there's certainly tens of reporters around the country, including one who I talked to from the New York Times, who said the same thing. They don't understand statistically significant. And so what you got out there is a movement of people that have data that shows virtually nothing, that are out there misleading the people. I'd like to think that it's not on purpose. I don't care whether it's on purpose or not, it's wrong. Yes.
Just to add a nuance. I think there are two important issues. One is whether something is statistically significant versus practically or mathematically significant. The other is just because you've got statistical significance, all that tells you is that given the data you use, the result you got is unlikely to have occurred due to chance variability in the data. It doesn't mean that there's anything reliable about your result. For example, I could do a regression showing that there's a relationship between the stork population and the number of babies that get born. And that could be statistically significant, but it's irrelevant because we know there's no causal connection between storks and babies.
What? Well, I've even shown my daughter that based upon regression analysis, that eventually she'll be older than me based upon a regression using the percentage difference in age, because the kid's getting smaller and the lines are clearly going to cross at some point. So, okay, we're running out of time. Let's give you a little bit on the international situation. I show you Moscow because Moscow is the most dense urban area in Europe. I realize some people may not think of Russia as Europe, but obesity in Canada, look what's going on. Same thing as in the United States. Obesity in the United Kingdom, I don't know what they've done on it now, but in December the Blair government announced that they were going to implement a curb on junk food advertisements during the time of the day that kids are watching television. Very serious concern there. My French university is also very concerned and doing research on child obesity. If you remember Moscow, the most dense urban area in Europe, remember in Russia, people tend to act, they tend to be treated like animals. They work, they ride transit, they walk, and for the most part they don't have cars. So what I've done here is shown you this map of the tendency of obesity in Europe, and notice the second highest category, you've got Russia, and I take you over there to Moscow. I mean, the fact is that urban areas in Russia are all very dense because most people don't have cars, and when you don't have cars, you got to get places on transit and by walking. And so the data does not hold up in Europe. Or you can look at the country by country data. You see that the worst obesity is in Germany, which has higher population density than France. I mean, they're all over the map. This is where the obesity comes in. This is of man, by the way, and this is where the population density is. So again, really hard to make any judgments based upon land use. A couple of quick thoughts about air pollution. This is Mount Fuji. Many of you have seen pictures of Mount Fuji. This is the view of Mount Fuji from the Shinkansen high-speed rail system. Now, I guarantee you, back there somewhere is Mount Fuji. Just to show you, there's a marvelous bit of research by Lorberg of Denmark. What's his first name? Do you recall? Anyway, where he basically goes and says...
Longor. Someone else did the research, but he compiled it in his book.
What they basically said is, let's look at air pollution in London in the last 400 years. And what they find is that the air pollution today, within the Greater London Authority has more than 7 million people. The air pollution is better than it was in 1600 when they had 100,000 people.
Bjorn.
Yeah, Bjorn, right. Air pollution improvements, you've already seen that driving is going up and air pollution is going down. Same thing is projected for Europe, and it's all because of vehicle technology. It doesn't have anything to do with transit because there's no increase in transit market share anywhere in the world to speak of. This is a chart from Vancouver, or from Toronto, just showing in the last 20 years, because there's some Canadian people out there that challenged me in a conference 2 years ago in Toronto and said, well, air pollution may be declining in the United States, but it certainly isn't in Canada. So I went and looked at the data, and it seems to be they didn't realize it.
Actually, ambient air pollution levels are going up. They're going up from a very low base.
Right.
But they haven't.
But I mean, the CO2, the CO, the OC,
the emissions are going down.
And NOx. Yeah, I mean, the emissions is one of the places to start. This shows you what goes on with respect to the production of emissions, the three major old criteria pollutants. If we were to implement the best policy for minimizing air pollution in our cities, it would be to speed up the traffic. There's no urban area in the United States where traffic moves at an average speed of 35 miles an hour without stopping. Okay? This means, because when you slow down and stop, you increase the production of air pollution. So improving traffic flow is very important to improving air pollution. And in fact, if you look at emissions, this is NOx. I forgot to put the thing in. This is, by the way, a picture of Hong Kong. And believe it or not, the most dense part of Hong Kong is not here, but it's over there. There's much lower rise in Kowloon. But anyway, you see that this is just an index compared to the United States, or no, an index compared to the average. But you see that the U.S. air pollution emissions on average are lower than in Europe. And anybody that doesn't believe that, try walking around Paris or London for a day in the core, and you'll see it, because the density, even with lower per capita driving, the density of traffic makes the air pollution worse. In fact, this afternoon I'll show you a slide.
Their cars emit a lot more pollution.
Well, I don't know about that. It may be, you may be right there, but it has really to do with the fact that per square mile, there's just much more vehicle miles. These cars.
It may be the air quality that's keeping people's weights down.
Oh,
So maybe the pollution, maybe the high density has about.
Well, they were just several years behind us.
Well, that may very well be. The basic problem is, and I should have thrown a slide in on this, that air pollution goes up, that driving goes up strongly with density at a rate of about 0.7 in the United States. And when you increase driving in a specific area, you slow it down, you use more stop and go, and air pollution is worse. So the worst conceivable strategy for solving air pollution is to increase density. And the worst conceivable solution for improving traffic congestion is the god-awful traffic that Earl Blumenauer has never experienced, apparently. You see in Portland, which has just gotten incredible, worst in the country of an urban area its size by far. Air pollution and density in the United States. This is stuff that Randall did a few years ago, and I understand, Joel, there's some later data that shows the same thing, but among the urban areas with extreme pollution, much higher population density going down to the urban areas with none. There are exceptions, unfortunately. Atlanta would be down here, but it is up here. But you think about Atlanta and compare that, say, with Portland, there aren't a lot of power plants to the west of Portland with driving dirty air into Portland. There are in Atlanta. It makes a big difference. And quality of life. I mean, I think that has to do with public health a bit. And I'll show this afternoon that all around the world, you name it, wherever people have the ability to live in single-family houses in the suburbs, they live there. This is out of Hanover. High density, as Joel indicates, gives us longer commutes. And indeed, one of the interesting things that often comes about is they say, well, we need to improve the jobs housing balance. Well, you know, Hong Kong, that has a population density of 128,000 people per square mile, the average work trip is 5 miles. When you think about it, that means people are ignoring 1 million jobs or so on the way to work. I mean, what's going on? Well, the fact is, planners can't plan for where we should live and work. I always like to show this slide. In terms of public health in the long run, we ought to be happy. We ought to be able to meet our aspirations. And I like this slide because it shows, you know, perhaps generations, if not centuries, of kids who have wanted to see out this window at this beautiful palace that some of you have probably visited, and I sort of call this my human aspiration slide. And what it comes down to is happy people are people that are able to do what they want to do. And of course, the old low man compact line, to the extent that we ought to allow people to live and work how and where and how they like, unless there's some good reason not to. And of course, the big failing of smart growth is they haven't identified any reason not to permit it.